I'm delighted now to introduce my colleague, Chris Graf, and he hopefully is going to somewhat respond to John's talk with some information about some of the work that publishers are doing to try to make the process a little better.
Hi, my name's Chris Graf, and I am one of the team of professional innovations that Wiley's just established, and I'm also the treasurer of a charity called COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. Who knows COPE already? Thank goodness, that's a relief. To respond to the question, how sound is the system, I decided to break it into two parts. That's how my brain works. I need to break things up. I thought it was useful to think about it. The first part being the upstream part in the publishing process, the sort of things that we're doing ahead of any ethical white water that we might be heading towards. And then second, of course, downstream, what we do to steer ourselves when we're navigating the ethical rapids, hopefully into clearer water. And the way that I'm going to talk about upstream and downstream is by focusing on what I know most about, the things that we've done proactively at Wiley in our publication or publishing ethics program. So I'm going to focus on those. It doesn't mean that things aren't happening at other companies. I'm sure they are, and maybe you can share some of those in the discussion afterwards. I'm going to talk a little bit about COPE along the way, and I hope that I'm going to finish with some recommendations that maybe you can join me in trying to achieve. So, upstream, here's the Wiley Publishing Ethics Program. It started in 2006, and in 2007 we published the Wiley Publication Ethics Guidelines for Editors. I think that we became the first major publisher to offer comprehensive publishing ethics guidelines to editors when we did that. At the same time, we purchased COPE membership for all of our editors, which was excellent. And now COPE has around exactly 38 publishers who are members, 9,000 editors who are members because of that relationship, but only one publisher on the COPE Board of Trustees. That's me. There are 20 elected board members, and just one of us is a publisher. That's the first thing that I think we should address. Maybe get a couple of other publishers elected to the board of COPE, because I think we can do things to change the way that things are currently working. Anyhow, we published our guidelines in 2007, and since they've been cited, for those of us who are into bibliometrics, about 40 times. Following that, starting in around mid-2007, we decided that we'd published all these guidelines, but we really didn't know what people thought about, what science editors thought about publishing ethics. So we set about perhaps putting the cart before the horse, surveying those editors and to find out what they thought about publishing ethics. And we published it in 2009, and the reference is there, so you can go and read it if you like. In the survey, we asked 524 editors 16 different questions, all about publishing ethics. 231 of those editors replied with some answers, and overall those editors said that they weren't so worried about publishing ethics, that they thought that problems were rare, but they were also, perhaps strangely, unaware of the guidelines that existed that they could use to then enforce standards and ask people to rise to those standards. So we thought there was a bit of a problem there, actually, and a disconnect. And one of the things that we did, inspired by COPE, was to conduct a journal audit. And this began in late 2009, with the first milestone being reached in 2010. And what we did was a cycle of audit, where we audited journal policies and processes against what we thought was best practice, as defined by COPE's audit tool. And then we looked at the responses, and we compared the responses with this best practice standard, offered individual feedback to each of those editors, and advice about changes that they could implement, and then we let them do it. And then, in phase 2, we did it all again. God, that was hard work. So in 2011, we started the second round of audit. So following feedback, we went back and asked the same questions to the same journals and measured the change, measure the difference. And in 2013, we published the results. Well, we kind of published the results. We presented the results at the Peer Review Congress last year in Chicago. And I'll show you some of the results in a minute. If you want to read the results, you can get that Dropbox link on the bottom right-hand corner and see the actual poster. But I'm going to tell you the results in a minute anyway. So that was our cycle of audit that lasts God knows how long, probably about 3 or 4 years in total. And then this year, just to cap it all off, from what we've learned, we decided that we should revamp our ethics guidelines. So 6 or 7 years after the first publication, we did a major initiative with colleagues from around the world to review our ethics guidelines and publish a new set, which you can read online. They were published on the 12th of March, only last month, and there's a website that you can go and read them and see what you think. So that is the Wiley Publishing Ethics Program. That's 8 years of my life. What a great 8 years it's been. I say that as a joke. It's not so much a joke. It has been a great 8 years. But what kind of difference do I think all this work has actually made? Well, that's why I'm going to show you the results of the audit. And you can decide. Well, I'll help you decide. I'll tell you what I think. So we asked so in the end, the audit ended up asking 82 journals the same 29 questions twice. There were other journals included in the audit, but they didn't answer them twice. This is the crew that stuck with the program and did it twice, and hats off to them because that was a lot of work. And the way that I'm going to show you the results, because there are so many results, I'm just going to show you the top half of the table. So the stuff that most journals, how do I say this? Ranked by percentage of journals with evidence of best practice. So the top of the list are the people who do it right, and I'm going to show you the bottom end of the list as well, and I'm going to ignore the guys in the middle. So what we've got here is the type of question that was asked, whether journals checked for redundancy. And in phase 2, 88% of the 82 journals did that, and that was 14% up on phase 1. So guess what? There's been an improvement caused by something, perhaps the passage of time, or perhaps some intervention that we might have made. And here are the other things. 87% of journals asked and published authors' conflicts of interest. 85% of journals corrected errors. 68% of journals had a process in place for issuing retractions. 67 labelled and linked those retractions properly. 66 had raised concerns with authors over ethics, and 60% asked reviewers to comment on research ethics on the stuff that they're peer reviewing. The bottom end of the table? I don't like the bottom end of the table. 27% of journals asked for clinical trials to be registered. So there's an indication for you that we were talking to medical journals, which is the case. And a whole load of other less pleasing results. And so my take home is there's room for improvement. And on my great days, my happy days, I think these results are brilliant. They give us a steer on what we need to do to improve. And on my less happy days, I think about that 8 years of work with loads of colleagues, trying to make a difference and seeing that we don't think we really made all that much of a difference. And if we're going to carry on the upstream, downstream metaphor, perhaps we're paddling in a little boat and we're trying to go against the current. And so my lesson from that is perhaps we were trying to go it alone, try and run a short, fast race, and perhaps maybe if we collaborated together with other publishers in some sort of competitive, albeit competitive but collaborative way, we might be able to get there faster by rowing harder together. So that's my upstream picture, and I promised you a downstream picture. It gets a bit more simple at this point. Yeah, I like that picture. He's still smiling though. So this is where we're heading towards ethical whitewater and the kinds of processes that the system has in place to steer safely through that whitewater and out the other side. Right, so I reckon we've got whistleblowing and or complaints, we've got investigations, we've got retractions, we've got possible legal action if and when that's needed, and then we've got the application of scrutiny. And I reckon that is happening downstream. To examine each, for the first two, whistleblowing and complaints, I think we need to be good at listening as publishers. And I think we need responsible and responsive editorial and publishing teams. And do you know what? I think we've got those at Wiley. I think we need a way for people to get in touch with either the person they've got a complaint against or with a generic route for getting in touch so that they can raise complaints they don't really want to raise with the person they're complaining against. And we've got a help desk so people can get in touch and raise those queries. And then we've got COPE. COPE hears complaints in a very specific way. And so I think that we are listening, which I think is pretty good. The second two, investigations and retractions. Well, sometimes publishers can do investigations on their own. But I think that's rare and probably limited to cases of duplicate publication or non-malignant, does that make sense? Non-malicious plagiarism. But I think those cases are few and far between. I think that investigations have to be involving many other stakeholders, not just us as the publishing world, not just the journal editors either, but also the institutions, clearly, and the funders and the others who are involved. So I do think we've got reasonable processes in place downstream to handle investigations and then to publish retractions. I think we've got actually pretty robust processes in place, certainly at Wiley, to manage the retraction process. It's pretty high stakes, and we take it really, really seriously, as I'm sure many publishers do. So we've got a brilliant set of data that's probably on pieces of paper that I'd love to analyse. But we have communications processes mapped, so who needs to be told what and when, inside Wiley, outside Wiley. We've got a record of the reasons for the retractions. That's all captured in paperwork. And we've got the dates and the stages for each step in the process recorded. That's from the request for a retraction, the investigation around that, the go-ahead to do a retraction, the draft retraction itself, the approval of that retraction, which usually at Wiley happens within 24 hours, the communications built around that, and then the retraction itself, when it's published and so on. So all of that paperwork's stored, and I'm definitely going to have a look at it. And second to last on the list is legal. We don't often go into legal matters around retractions, but when we have to, we have the team and the resources to do that. The last bullet there is scrutiny. Thanks, guys. I think we need more scrutiny. We've got great attention being paid to how the publishing process is being run, and I think that should be making us more accountable and better at what we're doing, which leads me on to my final slide, which is what I want. This is what I want. I want more work upstream. I want more openness across the whole process, and I want more scrutiny. Good God. Upstream, I want, we've got plagiarism checking tools, we've got Crossmark, and we've got, a certain amount of investment in training and peer review and the professionalisation of the editorial process. But I want more. I want more investment in those processes from Wiley, but from other publishers as well. In terms of openness, I want more openness about the policies and the processes that we use. I want open peer review. I do genuinely want open peer review. I know that our communities probably don't, by and large, but I do. I want to remove the mystery and the secrecy that surrounds the peer review process often, and I want to do that because I want it to be less clubby. I want to retain the good elements of a club for each of these journals and do away with the bad elements of a club for these communities in order to make us more accountable. And scrutiny. Well, I want to use the openness to enable guys like our journalist friends here to have a look at what we're doing, to criticise it, and to encourage us to change. Perhaps another way to encourage scrutiny would be by some sort of audit. Maybe an independent body could be asked to audit publishers and or journals, and those journals could do that on a cycle and be re-audited every couple of years, and maybe that would be a good thing. Last two statements, I would really love some collaboration, some co-opetition. That's a new word for me. Co-opetition. Cooperate, competition, smush them together, and you've got co-opetition. I'd love to do some of that around how to make bigger changes faster. And I think that might be a job for publishers to collaborate on, or it might be a job for an independent body, perhaps like COPE, to help take a lead on. Not sure. And I also want to ask us all, how far upstream can we look? Because it doesn't all sort of start at the publishing process. It starts way, way before that. And I want to know, we're an influential group. I want to know how far we can extend our influence upstream to start influencing the behaviours that we end up dealing with downstream. And that's where I'll end. Thank you.